Welcome back to Vietnamese Vixens. Today's story is about a man who thought he was building paradise in Vietnam, who believed he'd finally found genuine love after years of loneliness and disappointment. But paradise has a price, and sometimes that price is everything you own, every boundary you have, and every piece of dignity you thought you'd never lose. This is Marcus, 34 years old, from Stockholm, Sweden. He came to Vietnam looking for a fresh start. What he found was a masterclass in manipulation, so slow, so subtle, that by the time he realized what was happening, strangers were living in his house, eating his food, and he'd become invisible in his own home. If you've ever ignored red flags because you were desperate to believe in something good, if you've ever let people walk all over you because confrontation felt worse than suffering in silence, hit that like button and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Subscribe if you want more raw, honest stories like this. Now, let me tell you how it started, because it didn't start with lies. It started with hope. My name is Marcus, and I need to tell you this story because I'm still trying to understand how I let it happen. I'm from Stockholm, spent most of my adult life writing code for tech companies, living in expensive apartments with IKEA furniture and gray skies that made every day feel like the one before it. I was married once. Her name was Sophie. We were together for 7 years, married for 3 of them, and she left me for a guy she met at her gym. Classic story, right? I came home early one day and found them in our bed, the bed I'd paid for. In the apartment I was paying rent on. She didn't even have the decency to look ashamed, just annoyed that I'd interrupted. The divorce gutted me. Not just emotionally, though that was bad enough. Financially, too. Swedish divorce laws are fair, they say. Fair meant she got half of everything, even though she was the one who cheated. I lost the apartment, half my savings, and what felt like the last bit of faith I had in people. I was 32, starting over, and Stockholm felt like a cage made of ice and expensive coffee and people who smiled politely but never really looked at you. I'd been to Vietnam twice before, both times for work conferences in Ho Chi Minh City, but on the second trip, I extended my stay and took a train up to Da Nang. I don't know what I expected. Another generic Asian beach city, probably. What I found was something else entirely. The chaos, yeah, but organized chaos. The motorbikes flooding the streets like a river of metal and exhaust, the street food vendors with their tiny plastic stools, the way the city smelled like gasoline and grilled meat and fish sauce all at once. The heat hit you like a wall when you stepped outside, but it felt alive. It felt real in a way Stockholm had stopped feeling years ago. I stayed for 2 weeks that time, just wandering, eating pho at 6 in the morning, sitting on the beach watching the sun come up over the South China Sea. I met other expats, guys from Australia and America and the UK who'd moved there permanently. They told me about the cost of living, how far a Western salary could stretch, how you could actually afford a house instead of a shoebox apartment, how the women were beautiful and traditional, and actually wanted families instead of careers and feminist talking points. I listened to all of it with the kind of hunger I didn't realize I still had. When I got back to Stockholm, I couldn't settle. My apartment felt smaller. My job felt more meaningless. The gray sky felt personal, like it was mocking me. I started planning. Spent 6 months researching, learning basic Vietnamese on apps, joining expat Facebook groups, reading about visas and property laws and healthcare. My friends thought I was crazy. My parents thought I was running away. Maybe I was, but running away from a life that made you miserable didn't seem like a bad thing to me. I sold everything. The furniture, the car I barely drove, the electronics, all of it. Put in my notice at work. My boss asked if I was sure, said I was throwing away a good career. I told him I was sure. I'd never been more sure of anything. 2 weeks later, I was on a flight to Da Nang with 2 suitcases and a bank account that held everything I had left in the world. It wasn't a fortune, not by Swedish standards, but in Vietnam, it was enough to start fresh, enough to buy a house, enough to breathe. Finding the house took a month. I stayed in a cheap hotel near An Thuong Beach, spent my days riding a rented motorbike through neighborhoods, looking at properties with real estate agents who spoke broken English and showed me places that ranged from concrete boxes to elaborate villas I couldn't afford. I wanted something in between, something real. I found it in a quiet neighborhood about 20 minutes outside the city center, tucked behind a small temple and a family-run fee shop. 3 bedrooms, a small garden, tall walls with a gate, tile floors, and this beautiful wooden staircase that spiraled up to the 2nd floor. The owner was an older Vietnamese man who'd built it for his family but was moving to Saigon for work. He wanted to sell fast. We negotiated in a mix of English and Google Translate and hand gestures. I paid cash. The whole process took 2 weeks. I moved in on a Tuesday. I remember because the feed shop was closed, and I had to ride 15 minutes to find food. The house was empty except for a few pieces of furniture. The previous owner left behind a wooden table, some chairs, a bed frame. I didn't care. It was mine. I sat on the floor that first night with a beer I'd bought from the corner store, looking up at the ceiling fans spinning slowly, listening to the sounds of the neighborhood through the open windows. Motorbikes, dogs barking, someone's grandmother yelling at kids in Vietnamese, the distant clatter of dishes being washed. It felt like life. Real, messy, beautiful life. I spent the next few months settling in, bought furniture from local shops, hired a guy to paint the walls, planted some herbs in the garden that mostly died because I didn't know what I was doing. I worked remotely for a Swedish company that didn't care where I was as long as the code got written. My days fell into a rhythm. Wake up early, walk to the pawn shop for breakfast, work from home until afternoon, then ride around the city or go to the beach or sit in a cafe with my laptop pretending to work while really just watching people live their lives. That's where I met Lynn. The cafe was small, just 5 tables, tucked into an alley off Nguyen Van Lin Street. They made good coffee, the real stuff, KP Soi, that tasted like caramel and gasoline and woke you up better than anything Starbucks ever made. Lynn worked there. I noticed her the first time I came in because she was the only one who didn't stare at me like I was an alien. She just smiled, took my order in quiet English, brought my coffee, and left me alone. I started going there every day. Not because of her, not at first. I told myself it was because of the coffee, the location, the fact that they had decent Wi-Fi. But I noticed things. The way she moved, efficient and graceful, never wasting motion. The way she tied her hair back with a simple black band, no makeup, no jewelry, just clean and natural. The way she laughed at something her coworkers said. This surprised laugh that sounded genuine and unguarded. She looked young, mid-20s maybe, but there was something tired in her eyes that made her seem older. We started talking in increments. She'd ask how my day was. I'd ask her the same. She practiced her English. I practiced my terrible Vietnamese, and she'd giggle and correct my tones. Her name was Lynn. She was 25. She was from a small village in Quang Nam province, about an hour south. She'd come to Da Nang 2 years ago looking for work, sent money back to her family every month. She lived in a small room she shared with 2 other girls near Han Market. I liked her, not in the hungry way I'd seen other foreign men look at Vietnamese women, like they were products on a shelf. I liked the way she seemed real. Shy, but not performatively shy. Kind, but not in that fake service industry way. She never asked me for anything, never hinted, never gave me the feeling she saw me as a wallet with legs, which was something I'd already encountered plenty of in the bars and clubs where foreign men and Vietnamese women conducted their transactions under neon lights and bad techno music. It took me 3 weeks to ask her to dinner. I was nervous, felt like a teenager again, stumbled over the invitation in broken Vietnamese before switching to English. She said yes, but only after her shift ended, and only somewhere not too far because she had to get home before it got too late. We went to a seafood place by the river, sat at a plastic table under string lights, ate grilled fish and drank Saigon beer from bottles that sweated in the humid air. She told me about her family. Her mother had health problems, something with her liver. Her father had died 5 years ago. She had a younger brother, 19, smart, studying at university in Hue. She was proud of him. You could hear it in her voice. She said her family had a small rice farm, but it barely made enough to survive, so she'd come to the city to work and send money home. I told her about Stockholm, about my divorce, about feeling like I'd spent the first 30 years of my life doing what I was supposed to do, and waking up one day realizing I'd forgotten how to want anything. She listened in a way people rarely do, not just waiting for her turn to talk, but actually absorbing what I was saying. When I finished, she reached across the table and touched my hand for just a second, said she was sorry that happened to me, that I seemed like a good man who deserved better. Something cracked open in my chest when she said that. I didn't realize how badly I needed to hear it. We started seeing each other regularly after that. Dinners, walks along the beach, weekend trips to the Marble Mountains or down to Hoi An, where we wandered the lantern-lit streets and ate CL Lu's you. And she laughed at my attempts to bargain with street vendors. She never asked me to pay for everything, always offered to split, seemed genuinely uncomfortable when I insisted on covering meals. That made me want to pay even more. I had money, she didn't, it felt right to share it. She came to my house for the first time about 2 months after we started dating. I'd invited her for dinner, cooked pasta because it was one of the few things I knew how to make, and Vietnamese food still intimidated me beyond ordering it. She walked through the room slowly, touching things lightly, said it was beautiful, said I'd made a real home. We ate on the back patio, drank wine I'd bought from the expat store, talked until the mosquitoes got bad, and we moved inside. She didn't stay that night, said it was too soon, but she kissed me goodbye at the gate, and I floated back into the house, feeling like, maybe, finally, something good was happening. She started staying over on weekends, then a few nights a week. I gave her a drawer for her things. She cooked for me, real Vietnamese food, said she wanted to teach me about her culture. We'd go to the market together, her picking out vegetables and fish while I carried bags and tried to learn the names of things. She introduced me to her coworkers at the cafe, and they teased her in Vietnamese, and she blushed and swatted at them. Everything felt natural. Easy. Right. It was about 4 months in when she first mentioned her mother's health getting worse. We were lying in bed, the fan spinning above us, the night sounds of the neighborhood drifting through the window. She said it quietly, almost like she didn't want to bother me with it. Her mother needed to see a specialist, needed tests, but they were expensive, and the family couldn't afford it. She wasn't asking, just telling me because it was weighing on her. I asked how much. She told me, converted it to dollars for me. It was nothing by Swedish standards. A few $100s. I told her I'd help. She protested, said no, said she couldn't accept that, but I could see the relief in her eyes. I sent the money the next day. Her mother got the tests. Lynn was so grateful, she cried. She said I didn't know what it meant to her family, what it meant to her. She said I was different from other foreign men, that I had a good heart. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. After Stockholm, after Sophie, after feeling used and discarded, I wanted so badly to believe that someone could see me as more than just a resource. That someone could actually care. 2 weeks later, her brother's tuition was due and the family was short. Another few $100s. I paid it. Lynn didn't ask directly, but I offered, and she accepted with tears and promises that they'd pay me back someday. I didn't want them to pay me back. I had the money. They needed it. This was what good people did for each other, I told myself. This was what family did, and she was starting to feel like family. She moved in officially after 6 months. It happened gradually, naturally, the way she spent more nights at my place than at her shared room, the way her clothes filled the closet and her shampoo appeared in the shower. I asked her one morning if she wanted to just stay, stop paying rent on a room she barely used anymore. She said yes, kissed me, said she'd contribute however she could. I didn't need her to contribute financially. I just needed her there, needed to not be alone in that house anymore. For a while, it was perfect. We were a couple. We had routines. She quit the cafe job because I said she didn't need to work if she didn't want to, that I made enough for both of us. She said she'd take care of the house instead, cook and clean, and make it a home. And she did. The house had never looked better. Dinner was ready when I finished work. The garden actually started growing things. I'd come downstairs in the morning to find her making breakfast, humming to herself in Vietnamese, and I'd think about how far I'd come from that empty apartment in Stockholm, how right I'd been to leave. I didn't see it coming, the slow shift. Looking back, the signs were there, small things, but I was too happy to notice, or maybe too scared to notice, because noticing would mean admitting that maybe this wasn't what I thought it was, and I wasn't ready for that, not yet. I'd finally found something good, and I was going to hold on to it no matter what. The thing about being slowly consumed is that you don't notice it happening. It's not a sudden attack. It's erosion, water on stone, one drop at a time, until one day, you look down and realize there's nothing left of what you used to be. It started with Lynn's mother needing surgery. About 3 months after Lynn moved in, she came to me one evening while I was working. Stood in the doorway of my office looking small and worried. Her mother's liver condition had gotten worse. The doctors in Quang Nam said she needed an operation, something with her bile duct. I didn't fully understand the medical terms even when Lynn translated them. The operation cost $3,000. In Vietnam, that was a fortune for a family surviving on rice farming. For me, it was a month's salary, maybe less. I didn't hesitate. I told Lynn we'd take care of it. Her face crumpled and she cried into my shoulder. Said I was saving her mother's life. Said her family would never forget this kindness. I felt good about it. I felt like a good person. Isn't that what money was for? To help people you cared about? To make a real difference, instead of just accumulating numbers in an account? The surgery went well. Lin's mother recovered in a hospital in Tam Kai for 2 weeks. Lin went down to visit her 3 times, stayed overnight, came back exhausted but relieved. She showed me photos on her phone, her mother in a hospital bed looking small and tired but smiling, holding Lin's hand. I sent flowers. I paid the hospital bills. When her mother was discharged, Lin asked if, maybe, just for a few weeks while she recovered, her mother could stay with us. The village house was basic, no air conditioning, hard beds, not ideal for someone recovering from surgery. Just until she got her strength back, I said yes. Of course I said yes. What kind of person would I be if I said no? Lin's mother arrived on a Saturday morning. Her name was Hoa. She was 56 but looked older, worn down by years of hard farming and harder living. She spoke no English. She was polite, bowed slightly when Lin introduced us, said something in Vietnamese that Lin translated as, "Thank you for your kindness and generosity." I set them up in the guest room, the one I'd been using for storage and as a gym that I never actually used. Lin and her mother spent the afternoon arranging things, hanging up clothes, setting up a small altar with incense and a photo of Lin's dead father. The first week was fine. Hoa was quiet, stayed in her room most of the time, came out for meals that Lin prepared. The three of us would eat together, Lin translating bits of conversation, mostly just pleasant small talk about the weather and my work and how Hoa was feeling. She was recovering well, getting stronger every day. The second week, Hoa started emerging more. She'd sit in the living room watching Vietnamese dramas on the TV, the volume turned up loud because her hearing wasn't great. She'd shuffle around the kitchen in the morning, making her own breakfast, using my coffee and my rice and my eggs. Small things. I told myself it was fine. She was family. This was temporary. The third week, Lin said her mother was feeling much better, but maybe she should stay a bit longer, just to be safe. The village was far. The journey was hard on someone who just had surgery. Maybe another month. I agreed. What else could I say? A month turned into 2 months. Hoa was still there, still watching her dramas, still shuffling around my house in her pajamas until noon. The guest room was fully hers now, decorated with her things, her clothes permanently in the closet. She'd started cooking sometimes, Vietnamese food that was good, but used ingredients I'd never bought before, special sauces and expensive cuts of meat and fish from the market that Lin said her mother needed for her health. The grocery bills were climbing. I noticed, but I didn't say anything. Saying something felt petty, felt cheap. Like I was counting pennies when I should be grateful I could help. Then Lin's brother needed help. His name was Min, 19, studying engineering at university in Hugh Smart Kid, Lin always said. Going to have a good future. But the university had increased tuition, and his dorm fees had gone up, and there were textbooks and materials and equipment he needed. Another $2,000, Lin cried when she told me, said she hated asking, hated that her family needed so much. I held her and said it was okay, that education was important, that I was happy to invest in Min's future. I sent the money. Lin was so grateful. Her mother was grateful. They both thanked me profusely, said blessings in Vietnamese, said I was like a son, like family. I felt good about it again. I was making a difference. I was changing lives. Min started visiting on weekends. Lin said he wanted to thank me personally, wanted to practice his English. He'd take a bus down from Hugh Friday night, stay until Sunday evening. He was a nice enough kid, polite, respectful, called me Ann, which Lin said meant older brother. He'd hang out in the living room playing games on his phone or studying at my dining table. He ate my food, used my Wi-Fi, sometimes brought friends over, other university kids who'd laugh and talk in rapid Vietnamese while I worked upstairs, the noise filtering through the house. One weekend visit turned into 2, then 3. Then he mentioned his internship. He'd gotten an internship at a tech company in Da Nang. Great opportunity, would really help his career. The only problem was commuting from Hugh was impossible. Would it be okay if he stayed in the spare bedroom for a few months? Just during the internship, he'd be quiet, wouldn't cause any trouble. There was no spare bedroom, Hoa was in the guest room, but there was a small room on the ground floor I'd been planning to convert into a home office eventually. I hadn't gotten around to it. Min could use that, Lin suggested, just temporarily. He was family. I said yes. I always said yes. I always said yes. Saying no felt like being the bad guy, the selfish foreigner who had so much and wouldn't share. So Min moved in. He brought a mattress and a small desk, and suddenly there were 3 Vietnamese people living in my house. My house that was supposed to be my escape, my sanctuary, my fresh start. The dynamic shifted. Meals became louder, conversations entirely in Vietnamese, everyone talking over each other in that rapid-fire way that made me feel like I was watching a movie without subtitles. Lynn would translate sometimes, brief summaries that I knew weren't capturing half of what was being said. I'd see them look at me and laugh, and I'd ask what was funny, and Lynn would wave it off, say it was just a family joke, hard to translate. I smiled like I understood. I felt like a stranger in my own home. The bills started climbing. Electricity because the air conditioning was running constantly now in 3 rooms instead of 1. Water because there were more showers, more laundry, more cooking. Food because I was feeding 3 adults, plus whoever Min brought over on weekends. Internet because Min was streaming and downloading and video calling his friends at all hours. I'd check my bank account and see money disappearing faster than it used to. Nothing dramatic, just a steady drain that made me uncomfortable in a way I couldn't quite articulate. I tried to talk to Lynn about it. Chose my moment carefully. Waited until we were alone in bed one night. I said maybe we should talk about expenses. Maybe her family could contribute something since they were staying longer than we'd planned. Her face changed. The warmth drained out of it. She sat up, looked at me like I'd slapped her. She said I didn't understand Vietnamese culture. That family takes care of family. That her mother had raised her alone after her father died, worked herself to the bone so Lynn could have an education, and now that her mother needed help, what kind of daughter would Lynn be if she asked her to pay rent? And Min, he was investing in his future. He'd pay me back when he graduated and got a good job. This was how Vietnamese families worked. Everyone supported each other. Wasn't I part of the family now? Or did I see them as strangers, as freeloaders? I felt the guilt crash over me like a wave. I backpedaled, said no, of course not. I was just asking, just trying to understand, she cried. Said maybe she'd misunderstood what we were, maybe I didn't see her family as my family, maybe this wasn't going to work if I was going to count every dong and every kilowatt. I apologized. I held her. I said I was sorry, that I was just stressed about work, that everything was fine. She forgave me, but something had shifted between us. She was cooler for a few days, less affectionate, spending more time with her mother in the guest room, having long conversations I wasn't part of. One hated it. I hated the distance. I hated feeling like the bad guy, so I went out of my way to be better, to be more generous, to prove I wasn't the petty foreigner who cared more about money than people. More relatives started appearing. Lynn's cousin, a girl named Phum, needed a place to stay while she looked for work in Da Nang. Just 2 weeks, Lynn promised. Phum slept on a mattress in Hoa's room. 2 weeks became a month. Then an aunt, Hoa's sister, was passing through on her way to visit family in Hue and needed to stop for a few days. She stayed for 6 weeks. My house was full of people. Vietnamese voices at all hours. Cooking smells I didn't recognize. People using my bathroom, my kitchen, my living room like it was theirs. I'd come downstairs in the morning to find Aunt watching TV in her pajamas, Min eating cereal from my boxes, Phuong doing her makeup at my dining table. They'd greet me politely, say good morning in accented English, then switch back to Vietnamese conversations I wasn't part of. 1-500 make coffee and take it back upstairs to my office, close the door, try to pretend I had some space that was still mine. Lynn and I barely spent time alone anymore. She was always with her mother, or helping Phuong with job applications, or cooking dinner for everyone. When we were in bed together, she was tired, wanted to just sleep. Sex became rare, perfunctory when it happened. I'd try to talk to her about us, about how I was feeling, and she'd say she was tired. Could we talk tomorrow? Tomorrow never came. I started noticing other things. My groceries disappearing faster than they should, the good coffee I bought from the expat store vanishing in days, beers missing from my fridge. Small amounts of cash I kept in a drawer for emergencies, slowly dwindling. I told myself I was miscounting, that I'd spent it and forgotten. I didn't want to believe the alternative. The final straw for that phase came when I found out Hoa had been telling the neighbors the house was hers. I learned this from Mr. Than, the old man who ran the pho shop, who congratulated me one morning on being such a good son-in-law, taking care of my wife's family's house. I didn't correct him right away, too confused to process what he was saying. Later I asked Lynn about it. She laughed it off, said her mother was old, got confused sometimes, probably just misspoke. But I saw something flicker across her face, something that looked like guilt, or maybe annoyance that I'd found out. I let it go. I was good at letting things go by then. I learned that pushing back meant fights, meant crying, meant days of cold silence that made me feel worse than just accepting whatever was happening. So I accepted. I paid the bills. I smiled at the relatives. I worked in my office while my house filled up with people who treated me like a polite stranger, grateful for my generosity, but not particularly interested in who I was. Min's internship ended, but he didn't leave. He said he'd gotten a job offer at the company, couldn't pass up the opportunity. Would it be okay if he stayed a bit longer? He'd start contributing to rent soon, he promised. He never did. Feng found a job at a nail salon, but kept sleeping on the mattress in Hoa's room. The aunt left, but was replaced by another cousin who needed help getting on his feet after some unspecified trouble back in the village. My house had become a halfway home for Lin's entire extended family, and I was the silent benefactor, the ATM machine that funded it all, while slowly disappearing into the background of my own life. I'd wake up some mornings and lie in bed listening to the sounds of people in my house. Vietnamese voices and clattering dishes and the TV playing dramas I didn't understand. And I'd feel this creeping dread in my chest. This sense that I'd made a terrible mistake, but I was in too deep to get out. That I'd confused being needed with being loved. That I'd traded one prison in Stockholm for another prison in Da Nang, except this one was warm and crowded and spoke a language I'd never fully understand. But I still loved Lin, or I loved the idea of her, the version of her that existed in those first 6 months before her family arrived. I kept thinking we'd get back to that once everyone left, once it was just us again, things would go back to how they were. I just had to be patient, just had to be generous, just had to prove I was better than the selfish foreign men they'd probably encountered before. So I stayed quiet. I paid the bills. I watched my savings account slowly drain. I felt myself becoming smaller and smaller in my own home, my own life, until I was barely there at all, just a ghost who paid for everything and was tolerated because the money kept flowing. And the worst part was, one knew it was happening. I could see it. I just couldn't admit it to myself yet. Admitting it would mean facing the truth. And the truth was too painful to look at directly, not yet, but soon. The human mind has an incredible capacity for denial. You can see the truth right in front of you, clear as day, and still find ways to explain it away, to rationalize it, to convince yourself that you're wrong, that you're being paranoid, that things aren't as bad as they seem. I did that for months. I saw the signs, and I ignored them, because acknowledging them would mean admitting I'd been a fool. And I wasn't ready to be a fool. Not again. Not after Sophie. Not after Stockholm. I'd come to Vietnam to escape being used, and here I was, being used in ways that made my ex-wife look like an amateur. The breaking point started with money. It always comes down to money, doesn't it? I'd given Lin access to my secondary bank account, the one I used for household expenses and daily spending. I kept my main savings separate, told myself that was smart, that I was being responsible. I trusted her with the household account because we were partners, because that's what couples did. She needed to buy groceries, pay utilities, handle the daily stuff while I worked. It made sense. I started noticing the withdrawals in late November, about 8 months after her family had basically occupied my house. Small amounts at first, 200,000 dong here, 300,000 there. Amounts that could be explained by market trips or unexpected expenses, but they were happening frequently, sometimes multiple times a day. I checked the statements on my phone one evening while sitting in traffic on my motorbike, stuck behind a broken-down truck near the Han River Bridge. I scrolled through the transactions, adding them up in my head. Over 5 million dong in a week, about $250. For groceries? For a family that I was already feeding with my main shopping trips. I didn't say anything that night. I watched Lin at dinner, laughing at something her mother said, serving food to Min who barely looked up from his phone, and I tried to see what I was missing. Maybe there were expenses I didn't know about. Medical things for her mother, school supplies for Min, things she was too proud to ask me for directly. But the withdrawals continued. Larger amounts. I started checking the account daily, watching my balance drop like water leaking from a cracked tank. 500,000 dong, 700,000, 1 million in a single withdrawal. That was $50, taken from an ATM near the cathedral downtown. I knew Lin had been home all day because I'd seen her when I came down for lunch. So who was using the card? I finally asked her about it on a Sunday morning. Everyone else was still asleep. Rare moment of quiet in the house. We were in the kitchen, she was making coffee, I was sitting at the counter with my phone open to the banking app. I tried to keep my voice calm, non-accusatory. Just asked if she knew about the large withdrawals, if everything was okay, if there were expenses we needed to discuss. She glanced at the phone, then at me, and something flickered across her face, too quick to read. Then she smiled, said yes, sorry, she'd meant to tell me. Her mother needed medicine, special medicine from a pharmacy downtown, and Min had needed money for a project at work, something technical he had to buy materials for. And Feng's motorbike had broken down, needed repairs, family things, emergency things, nothing to worry about. I asked why she hadn't mentioned it. She said she didn't want to bother me. I was always so busy with work, so stressed. She was just trying to handle things. Wasn't that what I wanted? For her to take care of the household? The logic was circular and slippery, but I nodded. Said okay. Asked her to tell me next time, just so I knew what was happening with the account. She said of course, kissed me on the cheek, went back to making coffee. I sat there feeling like something was wrong, but unable to pinpoint exactly what. 2 days later, I was working upstairs when I needed to check something about a wire transfer. Opened my banking app and saw that my main account, the savings account that was supposed to be separate, had a withdrawal of 15 million dong, $650, gone. Transferred to an account I didn't recognize. My stomach dropped. I checked the transaction history. This wasn't the first time. There had been smaller transfers over the past month that I'd missed because I didn't check this account as frequently. 2 million here, 3 million there. Amounts small enough to overlook if you weren't paying attention, but adding up to thousands of dollars. I felt cold despite the heat. Felt like the room was tilting. This account didn't have a shared card. The only way to access it was through online banking. Was my password, which I'd never given to anyone. I went downstairs. Lin was on the couch watching TV with her mother. Min was at the dining table with his laptop. Fong was doing her nails in the corner. A normal afternoon in my house that no longer felt like mine. I asked Lin if I could talk to her privately. She looked annoyed at being interrupted, but followed me upstairs to the bedroom. I closed the door. I showed her the transactions. Asked her directly if she'd taken money from my savings account. Her face went through several emotions in rapid succession: surprise, defensiveness, hurt, anger. She said yes, she'd taken some money, but only because there were emergencies. Real emergencies. Her mother needed a procedure, a follow-up treatment that insurance didn't cover. Min's motorbike had been in an accident, needed expensive repairs, or he couldn't get to work. There'd been a leak in the village house. Her family needed money to fix the roof before the rainy season, or everything would be destroyed. I asked why she didn't ask me first. Why she went into my private account, the one I never said she could access. How did she even get the password? She said she'd seen me type it in once, remembered it, used it because she knew if she asked I'd say yes anyway. So what was the difference? And why was I being like this? Since when did I care so much about money? I'd said I wanted to help her family, that we were in this together, that her family was my family now. Was that all a lie? Did I only care about her when it was convenient? When it didn't cost me anything? The guilt was immediate and overwhelming. She was crying now, saying she must have misunderstood everything, must have thought this meant more to me than it did. Maybe she should just leave, take her family, go back to the village where at least people understood loyalty and sacrifice. I was apologizing before I even realized what I was doing. Saying no, wait, I'm not angry, I just wanted to understand, just wanted us to communicate better. She let me hold her, let me comfort her, but I could feel the calculation in it now. The performance. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed next to Lin, listening to her breathe, and something had broken open in my mind, a clarity I'd been avoiding for months. I got up quietly, took my laptop to the bathroom, locked the door, and checked my accounts thoroughly. Really looked at the patterns. The withdrawals from both accounts, cross-referenced with dates and amounts. Over the past 6 months, roughly $40,000 had been spent or withdrawn. $40,000. In 6 months. My salary was good, but not that good. My savings were depleting at a rate that would leave me broke in less than a year. I felt sick, physically sick. Sat on the bathroom floor with my laptop, the fluorescent light buzzing overhead, the sounds of the house settling around me, and faced what I'd been refusing to see. This wasn't a relationship. This was a transaction. I wasn't Lin's boyfriend. I was a resource. A renewable resource they were mining until there was nothing left. The next morning, I started paying attention differently, really watching. I saw Min wearing brand new Nike shoes, expensive ones, the kind that cost at least $100. I saw Fong with the new iPhone, scrolling through it at breakfast. I saw Hoa cooking with premium ingredients, cuts of beef and imported vegetables that she definitely wasn't buying for medical reasons. I checked Lynn's closet when she was out with her mother. Found 3 designer handbags, hidden in the back, tags still attached to 2 of them. Gucci. Louis Vuitton. Brands that cost thousands of dollars. She'd been using my money to buy luxury goods while telling me her family was desperate, while making me feel guilty for even asking questions. I felt rage then, pure, clean rage, that cut through the confusion and the guilt and the self-doubt. But I didn't confront her yet. I needed to be sure, needed to know the full extent of it. So I watched and I listened. That evening, I pretended to go for a ride, said I needed to clear my head. Instead, I parked my motorbike around the corner and came back quietly, let myself in through the back gate, stood outside the kitchen window where I could hear them talking. They didn't know I spoke as much Vietnamese as I did. I'd been learning for months, more than I'd let on, understanding more than I pretended. What I heard destroyed the last bit of hope I had. Lynn and her mother talking in the kitchen. Hoa asking how much longer Lynn thought she could keep this going. Lynn laughing, saying the stupid foreigner would probably give her whatever she wanted, until he had nothing left. Hoa saying they needed to be careful, couldn't push too hard or he might wake up. Lynn saying, don't worry, foreign men like him were all the same, so desperate to believe someone loved them that they'd ignore anything. As long as she cried and fucked him occasionally, he'd keep paying. Her mother asked about the house. Lynn said she'd been planting seeds with the neighbors, making sure everyone knew this was her family's house, that the foreigner was just staying there. That way, if things went bad, if he tried to kick them out, the community would be on their side. Foreigners had no rights here, not really. Not when it came to family disputes. I stood there in my own garden, listening to the woman I loved discuss me like I was a mark, a job, a stupid ATM machine, and something in me just went silent. The rage crystallized into something cold and hard and final. I waited until the next day. Let them think everything was normal. Went to work like always. But I spent the day making calls. Called a lawyer, an expat lawyer who specialized in property rights and domestic disputes. Explained the situation. He told me what I needed to do, warned me it might get ugly, said I had every right to remove unauthorized occupants from my property. I called the police, non-emergency line, explained the situation there too. They said they'd send someone if there was a dispute, but advised me to handle it through the courts. I said I'd try to handle it peacefully first. I came home at 5 p.m. Everyone was there. Lynn cooking dinner, Hoa watching TV, Min on his laptop, Phuong getting ready to go out. A normal scene in my invaded house. I asked everyone to come to the living room, said I needed to talk to all of them. They gathered slowly, looking confused. Lynn asked if everything was okay. I said no. Everything was not okay. I told them I knew about the money, all of it. The withdrawals, the lies, the designer bags, the luxury items bought with cash that was supposed to be for emergencies. I told them I'd heard the conversation in the kitchen, understood more Vietnamese than they thought, told them I knew what they really thought of me. The room went silent. Lynn's face drained of color. Hoa started protesting in Vietnamese, fast and angry. Min looked at his phone, avoiding eye contact. Phuong glanced at the door like she was calculating an escape route. Lynn started crying. Said I'd misunderstood, said she loved me. Said yes, maybe she'd taken some money without asking, but it was because she was scared I'd say no, because her family really needed it, because I didn't understand how desperate things were in the village. She reached for me. I stepped back. I told them they had 48 hours to leave my house. All of them. I wanted them out. Lynn screamed that she had nowhere to go. I said that wasn't my problem anymore. She said I couldn't do this. This was her home. I said no. It was my home, my name on the deed, my money that paid for it, and they were trespassers who'd overstayed their welcome. Hoa started yelling, calling me terrible things in Vietnamese, saying I was heartless, cruel, that I'd promised to take care of them. Ming stood up, got in my face, said I couldn't just kick his family out, started making threats about what would happen if I tried. I pulled out my phone, showed him the lawyer's number already dialed, said one more threat and I'd call the police right now. The room erupted. Everyone shouting, crying, cursing. Lynn begging, switching between English and Vietnamese, saying we could work this out, saying she was sorry, saying she'd pay me back, her mother wailing about how they'd be on the street. Phuong crying in the corner. Min pacing, punching the wall, calling me every name he could think of. I stood there and let it wash over me. Felt nothing. Or maybe felt everything at once and it averaged out to nothing. I repeated it. 48 hours. Then I'm changing the locks and calling the police to remove anyone still here. They didn't believe me at first. Spent that evening trying different approaches. Lynn tried seduction, wearing the lingerie I'd bought her, saying we could fix this, saying she'd prove she loved me. I told her to get dressed and sleep in the guest room. Hoa tried guilt, showing me pictures of Lynn as a child, talking about how hard life had been, begging me to have mercy. I walked away. Min tried intimidation, standing outside my bedroom door at 2 a.m., saying I'd regret this, saying he had friends who could make things difficult for foreigners. I called the police. They came, spoke to everyone in Vietnamese, told Min to calm down or he'd be arrested. The next day, they started packing. Slowly, resentfully, but packing. Except they weren't just packing their things. I watched them load the TV into a truck, my TV. Watched them try to take the dining table, the chairs, the good mattress from the guest room. I stopped them, said those stayed. They argued. I called the lawyer, put him on speaker. He explained in Vietnamese that taking my property was theft, that I could prosecute. They put things back, cursing me the whole time. Lynn tried one last time the night before the deadline. Came into my room, sat on the bed, said she was sorry for everything. Said she really had loved me at first, that it had started genuine, but her family had needed so much and it had gotten out of control. Said if everyone else left, could she stay? Could we start over? I looked at her and saw a stranger. This beautiful woman who'd made me believe I was special, who'd made me feel loved, who'd seen me as nothing but a wallet from the very beginning. I told her no. She needed to leave with her family. She asked where she was supposed to go. I said I didn't know, and I didn't care. She called me a monster, said I was like every other foreign man, only interested in Vietnamese women as long as they were submissive and grateful. Said I'd used her just like she'd used me. Maybe she was right, I didn't care anymore. They left on a Sunday morning, 4 of them, loading their stuff into a borrowed truck, taking everything they'd brought and a few things they managed to slip past me. The neighbors watched, some of them looking sympathetic to my family's plight, others avoiding eye contact. Mr. Than from the fee shop asked what happened. I told him the truth. He looked sad but unsurprised, said foreigners and Vietnamese families, always complicated, wish me luck. The house was suddenly empty, silent. I walked through the rooms, seeing the damage they'd left behind, stains on the walls, broken tiles, the garden destroyed. Missing items I'd noticed later, small things they'd stolen on the way out. The guest room smelled like cigarettes and old clothes. The smaller room where Min had stayed had holes punched in the wall from his anger. I sat in my living room that night, the room that had been full of people just yesterday, and felt the weight of the silence. No TV dramas at maximum volume, no Vietnamese conversations I couldn't follow, no cooking smells, no laughter, no life. Just me and the house and the truth. I'd come to Vietnam to escape loneliness. Instead, I'd invited it in, fed it, gave it my money and my trust and my stupid, desperate hope that someone could want me for who I was instead of what I had. Sophie had taken half my money in Sweden. Lynn and her family had nearly taken the rest in Vietnam. I was $40,000 poorer and exactly as alone as I'd been when I started. But I was free. That counted for something. I'd gotten out before they took everything. Before they managed to manipulate me into signing the house over, which I knew now had been the long-term plan. Before I ended up completely broke in a country where I'd be dependent on others the way they'd pretended to be dependent on me, I stayed in Vietnam. Didn't run back to Stockholm with my tail between my legs. I fixed up the house, filled the holes, painted the walls, made it mine again, started being more careful, more guarded. Made friends with expats who'd been through similar things, who understood that paradise has a price, and sometimes that price is learning not to trust your own desperate need to be loved. I see Lynn sometimes around the city. She got a new foreign boyfriend within 2 months, some Australian guy who looks at her the way I must have looked at her once. Like she's salvation. Like she's different. I want to warn him, but I don't. He wouldn't listen anyway. Nobody ever does until it happens to them. I'm okay now. Not happy maybe, but okay. I learned the lesson I came here to learn, just not the one I wanted. Some people see you as a person. Some people see you as a resource. And the cruel thing is, the ones who see you as a resource are often better at making you feel loved than anyone who actually loves you, because they're performing. And performance, when done well, is more convincing than authenticity ever could be. So yeah, that's my story. That's how I ended up kicking my Vietnamese girlfriend's family out of my house in Vietnam. How I lost $40,000 and whatever was left of my ability to trust. How I learned that running from one prison just builds another, if you're not careful about who you let have the keys. If you're watching this from somewhere, thinking about making the same move I did, about finding love in Southeast Asia, about starting fresh in paradise, just remember this. Paradise is expensive, and sometimes the cost isn't money. It's the piece of yourself you lose when you realize you were never seen as human, just as opportunity. Thanks for listening. If you've got a story like this, drop it in the comments. If you're watching from somewhere specific, let us know where you're from. And if this resonated with you, if you've ignored red flags because you wanted so badly to believe, hit that like button and subscribe because you're not alone. We're all out here, trying to figure it out, making mistakes, learning the hard way. And sometimes, just knowing someone else went through it too makes the silence a little less heavy. Take care of yourselves out there. And remember, being alone is better than being used. Even if it doesn't feel that way at 3 a.m. in an empty house that used to be full of people who never actually saw you.